letter from the Gantry.
Thanks, Neil. It was 50 years plus 1 month, less 1 day from my first commentary at Bournemouth to my most recent. March the 15th, 1975 to April the 14th, 2025. The contrast could hardly have been greater. From a third division, now League One, relegation battle against Preston North End to a charge for Europe against fellow chasers of continental football, Fulham. 2 games on the same site, but in a stadium which had been rebuilt and the pitch turned 90 degrees, pretty much in the middle of that 50-year-old gap between the two events. But one aspect was identical. Bournemouth won both matches 1-0. The ground was called Dean Court in 1975 and is still so, I guess, in the minds of the older Cherries supporters. Now it's the Vitality Stadium to the rest of us, and as sponsorships go, that has a nice enough ring to it. The nickname the Cherries came about incidentally because cherry trees apparently grew on the site when football first moved in. Despite their difficulties at the time, Bournemouth of 1975 had a bit about them. Earlier in the 1970s, the club's rather unwieldy name of Bournemouth and Boscombe Athletic was changed to AFC Bournemouth, with an eye on moving up the Football League ladder, at least alphabetically. The red and black striped shirts had recently been introduced with a nod to the Italian giants AC Milan. I pitched up in March 1975 to commentate for Southern Television on a Bournemouth team that had won just once in their last 10 league games, and had early in the year been trounced 7-3 at home by Plymouth Argyle, and were staring relegation in the face. In truth, the bigger attraction was the opposition. Not such a proud Preston at the time, though they arrived in the top 4 of the third tier, and their player-manager was none other than Bobby Charlton, not yet Sir Bobby, but with those 106 England caps to his name. And lining up alongside him that day at Dean Court, fellow World Cup winner Nobby Stiles, who was his player coach. 1966 was still very fresh in the memory. They were real star attractions down on the south coast on that early spring Saturday afternoon. There was another Manchester United connection in former Scotland international Francis Burns. He played, but David Sadler, who won the European Cup with United in 1968, was missing through injury. Bournemouth did have one player with top-flight experience, a certain Harry Redknapp, who'd just turned 28 and had come south from West Ham a couple of years earlier. He was forging those strong ties with the club and the area where he still lives. Bournemouth hadn't scored in their previous 6 league games in 1975, but against all the pre-match predictions, they took the points. Just 2 still in those days for a win, with a goal from their left-back, Les Parody, a Londoner with an Italian name, inspired maybe by those Milan-style Bournemouth shirts. But the Cherries still got relegated. Preston, who dropped a division under Bobby Charlton the season before, failed to get promotion, and arguably England's greatest ever player bowed out of management later that year, never to return. Les Parody left the Bournemouth scene soon afterwards and continued his playing career in the United States, like many solid pros at the time. But a couple of years ago, Ben Shepherd, the television presenter, rang me to say he'd bumped into Les in the UK, and that goal against Preston way back in 1975 had dominated their conversation. Fast forward now to my recent visit, and Bournemouth were again in need of a win in vastly more upmarket circumstances. They were still in the top half of the Premier League despite losing their previous 4 home games. Scoring in the first minute through Antoine Semenyo was a great start, but hardly seemed a platform for victory. Yet it was. And at the final whistle, Bournemouth moved up to 8th. Only their 8th season ever in the top flight, remember, all in the last 10 years. Amazing progress in a stadium with a capacity less than half of what it was in the mid-1970s. Semenyo, born in Chelsea. Parody, from Lambeth, just across the river. Only a commentator could draw such tenuous connections. But both were match winners 50 years apart, and I had the privilege of shouting their names.
Brilliant. Right. A few questions. Was in fact Bournemouth and Boscombe, because Boscombe's a little town next.
The ground is in Boscombe. I believe the ground is actually in Boscombe.
I've walked into Boscombe.
Yeah, by King's Park. It's very scenic.
I watched England under-17s win the World Cup in a bar there before going to a game. Was it changed in reality to AFC Wimbledon because of financial
It was changed to AFC Bournemouth. No,
AFC Bournemouth. What did I say?
No, they've had some administration. I thought, a bit like you just suggested, Neil, that was the case, but I just think it was trying to upgrade it.
Oh, really?
And the AFCs that we have around now are usually because the original name of the club, because of the financial collapse, really,
So it wasn't
bankruptcy. So they can't call them AFC Halifax. One can't call them Halifax Town, for example. And AFC Wimbledon is the Phoenix club, obviously, the original Wimbledon.
Yeah, and talking of Bournemouth players of a past age, we got to mention Eddie Howe, who everybody wishes well, obviously.
And hopefully it's on the mend,
Did you see him play?
No.
No. Did anybody? I mean, he had a long career, but no, I never saw him.
Well, who are we talking about, Eddie Howe?
Yeah.
No. I didn't see him play. But he's only 47 now, isn't he?
Yeah.
So,
I think we should get Eddie Howe on the podcast to go through his playing career.
I'm sure he'd love to do
that. That would be brilliant. My final question on Bournemouth. You can get there driving through the centre of the New Forest. It's a fabulous route. But the most obvious way is the straight road past near the airport, coming down off the A27. It's not quite one road in, one road out, like I think Barrow is.
I can prove to you that it's two roads out because the A27 was closed after the game, and which is the main route. And I was commentating with Joel Ward, who's still a Premier League player, of course, and is making his way in broadcasting, who would normally travel to these games in luxury coaches as a player. But he'd made his way down from the Surrey area. And he passed if there are such things as broadcasting tests, he did very good work on the game. But the one thing I haven't spoken to him since is how he coped with the journey home. Welcome to our world, Joel. And the road that ran parallel to the A27 was about as wide as this table. And it was a constant stream, obviously, lots and lots of cars. And there was absolutely no overtaking straight through. And
what time did you get back?
I don't know, 1:30, something like that, and it's normally would normally be 12:30. No, it was a bit earlier than that. But listen, that's part of the job. I don't have any problem with it, but I'm sure Joel won't have any problem with it either. But it was I'm sure a nice experience for him to come down and do the game, and he's obviously got a natural broadcasting skills. And on the way back, he'd be cursing Tyler for getting him to do this.